Welcome back to the Alpha Duty channel. Hope you're doing great and still working on yourself. Today we will react to a video from the Whatever podcast channel where Candace Owens has been invited and tries to explain what is the hoeflation to a panel of empowered women. Without any further ado, let's get into this.
Because at least from the things that I've read and that I've studied, it seems like that is true, but in a very particular context. And that very particular context was like basically abstinence only education, which I don't know about you guys, but makes complete sense to me. Because if you tell teenagers like, don't do this thing is like super, like don't do it. It feels super good, but you're not supposed to do it or whatever. If you phrase it that way, then teenagers are going to go out and do it. Because like at least everything that I've seen recently has been talking about how if you talk about proper sex ed and people who have more access to contraceptives as well as better sex ed tend to have like a lower body count than people who are like in like lower education, less sex ed, less access to contraception. So I was just wondering like your thoughts on that.
I'm telling you it's not true factually. In the 70s, before they got Planned Parenthood, went in the classroom and started funding initiatives, and they started teaching sex education. There used to not be sex education in school, and the way that they got it into the classroom in the 70s was by saying, it's better to teach them, which is what you're saying, because then they'll be more responsible. It actually, within one decade, it flipped. The majority of high schoolers were graduating with their virginity before there was sex education, and then when they put sex education in the classroom, the majority of them within 10 years were not graduating with their virginity. So it actually sexualized children.
Yeah. My understanding, but the reason why was because the first manifestations of sex education was abstinence only,
and it was working is what I'm saying to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was working. So abstinence, it used to be considered, and I'm not at all trying to, I'm just telling you what the facts are here. Like when abstinence was the cultural simulation, when everyone said you should be abstinent, you should not have sex before marriage, that idea was permeated throughout culture. It was reflected in culture. There were no sex ads. There weren't people naked on the internet, and people lived their lives. It was considered a big thing, to lose your virginity. You were actually considered someone that maybe a guy wouldn't want to marry because you lost your virginity. That was the cultural understanding, like, in the 50s and the 60s. And then in the 70s, you had this fourth wave of feminism that reared its ugly head and started associating sexual promiscuity to freedom, and things completely flipped.
Exactly. Things started to change when neo-feminism started to associate sex liberation with freedom and empowerment. It was not the case when the fight was about access to education or access to the working field. Nowadays, the only thing we hear is my body, my choice, hookup culture, mother. And most importantly, the pay gap, because they want to be paid with the wage of a job they don't even do.
Again, I'm just giving you a historical analysis of what happened in the classroom.
Yeah, I'd
without
be interested.
Commentary.
Hold on.
It's okay if you. Sorry, I'll just finish.
Make it quick if you
can.
can.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see like where exactly you're getting that from. If like later you can tell me or whatever.
Thomas Sowell Inside the Education System, and he has all of the sources listed in the back of the book.
Okay, because at least in modern day, do you think that any of that has flipped or no?
No, I think we've become. There was, to use a term, I was actually talking about this yesterday on a podcast. I thought it was pretty brilliant. Paul Joseph Watson, I love his YouTube stuff, and he started talking about hoeflation, which is like
that's a thing.
Actually hilarious, which is saying that men used to have to do a lot less and get a very high value woman. He's like, so think about your grandparents and your grandmother. She was a high value woman. She raised the kids. She was conservative. She was beautiful. All of these things, and now we live in this moment where everyone's kind of a hoe, and you have to work harder to get a woman that doesn't have any self-respect or any value. And I just thought it was a really interesting video. It was obviously funny, but he was saying something. And we live in hoeflation now, where everybody in their own capacity is selling their bodies.
She got the major point here. For those who might not be familiar with the term, as she said, by definition, hoeflation is the concept of men having to work 20 times harder than their grandfathers did for women 20 times worse than what their grandmothers were. And it's true. If you don't believe it, just look around, you will see.
And unfortunately, these are the options that men have. No, I'm not saying, it's stunning to me that women talk about what men need to be and what men need to be, but I think just kind of the complete disintegration of when I look at, what my grandmother looked like in pictures. She passed in 2013, and just how classy and how beautiful and how much I wanted to be like her. And now I look at, women today, and I just think, man, I feel bad for guys that that the pool is getting smaller, but also it's really positive for women that are conservative and who it means that you're part of maybe a smaller pool of individuals. I see it a lot more in the South, and that men should aspire to pursue those women, absolutely, to raise their families and, to raise their kids.
Do you co-sign on the Hoeflation
Oh, yeah.
theory?
I believe, yeah.
Oh.
The women today
Okay.
are very low value. And so it's funny because the simulation is like men ain't shit is kind of the thing everybody's saying. Don't need a man. And it's funny that someone brought up Beyonce because she's living the exact opposite of what she's singing. She's just making money because she knows how to make money in a Hoeflationary environment.
And that's the other problem. Those women have leaders known as Boss B, mainly singers who help to perpetuate this I don't need no men, single mother ideology, when at the same time they have $1 million wedding ring on their fingers. What's even the point of listening to people that don't do what they preach? Unless you want to be manipulated.
Smart woman. She's like, I'm just going to pretend to be a hoe, but then actually privately I'm going to be like super like...
Hold on. You wanted to come in, then you, please, if you can, try to keep it brief because I need to get to chat.
I was just going to say that my version of sex education, my sex education was literally them showing us a birthing photo or video, sorry.
Yeah, in 4th grade.
That terrified me, and I was like, actually, I don't think I'm going to have sex for a long time. I think I'm good.
Go ahead.
And like speaking of hoeflation, I mean, we're always trending apparently, right? Because
Who's we?
Hoes. Because without us hoes, you wouldn't have like that many views to be watching, right? You have hoes come on the podcast to talk about our...
I'm not knocking hoes.
I don't want to be a hoe.
I don't want to be a hoe. I'm saying you have hoes, and when I say you have hoes coming onto the podcast, you know you're a hoe if
Do you
you're
mean
a hoe.
literal hoe or like more of the colloquial?
That's Brian's dream.
You know what I mean?
You have hoes, Brian.
So that's going to be the end of our video. Thank you if you have made it this far. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps a lot. Feel free to share your thoughts on the topic in the comment section. See you on the next episode.